to the Muslim Community Center. Whose first time is this coming to the MCC? All right, great, welcome. So my name is Farhana Shah. I am one of the members here, longtime members, involved in many things. So, and we're one of the very progressive mosques and very diverse. So we're very proud of our mosque in that, and just like Montgomery County, I guess it kind of aligns with Montgomery County as well. Very diverse. So once again, welcome. I'm going to ask our MCC president to come and say a few words and welcome you as well, and then we'll hand over the mic to Mimi, who will go ahead and tell us a little bit about the program. All right?
Good evening. My name is Usman Sarwar. I'm the current president of the Muslim Community Center. I want to welcome everyone for joining us tonight. Hopefully it's a topic that's dear and dear to, I think, a lot of people who are affected by policies that deal with immigration, right? It's a very sensitive topic. It's a very diverse country we live in today. As Farhana mentioned, the MCC is probably, I would say, one of the most diverse mosques in the area. We've built a lot of partnerships over the years. We have a lot of friends in the room. We really welcome you here tonight. And hopefully we'll hear from Dr. Sahar and some really good tidbits on this topic tonight. We just wanted to welcome everyone. Thank you for coming.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Thank you so much, Brother Usman. Thank you so much, Farhana, for giving us the opportunity. This is actually our second Indivisible 14 event here at MCC. So I hope that this will become your home, your new home. You stop by at any time. You come see us praying. So you don't wonder what's under that big dome over there, okay? It's a really nice chandelier, okay? So, my name is Hassanein, and I am one of the members of the Indivisible 14, and we have 5 or 6 people, I believe. So let me recognize Sharon, one of the members, Brenda, back there, please stand up. Lori, please stand up. Robin? Okay, let's give them a big hand. All right, great. Yes, yes. Oh, Chris, how can I forget that? Okay. So this is the group that we really work hard. I'm going to be biased, and I'm going to say, and District 14 is the best district. Just because, you know what? It has all the religious groups here. You know, you've heard about New Hampshire Avenue is the highway to heavens. So, so you make sure you stop and visit all those churches, synagogue, and mosque. Today's event, this evening's event, is a very special one and dear to my heart because we're going to talk about the Muslim ban and also what's happening with CASA. And with ICE, and what's our brother Latino from the Latino community are faced too. It's not just the Muslim. I think the new administration want to really get rid of all immigrants. I don't know who America will belong to if they get rid of us. They may not have anybody staying back here. But so tonight's event, we're going to have Mr. Evans Glass. He's going to talk about the Fabric of America producer by Gandhi Bridge. Evans, where are you? Okay. We have Dr. Sahar Khamis. She's a very dear friend of mine. She appears on Al Jazeera and all those channels, CNN and all those channel big news. She's going to talk about the Muslim ban. We have George Escobar from Director of Human Service at CASA. And we have a special dentist who was a surprise today. I mean, it's not a surprise, but when they heard about the work we're doing, he said, can I come and share the outcomes and what we have been doing? And his name is Mr. Kea, right? Did I say that? He is from the Catholic Legal Immigration Network, Inc. And him and Dr. Sahar will talk about the Muslim ban. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the evening tonight, and you are more than welcome. And please come here and visit at any time. And I'm sure if you want to have an event, speak to Brother Usman. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mimi. Thank you, District 14 Indivisible, for inviting me and my youth, Allyssa, to be with you tonight. My name is Evan Glass, and I am the Executive Director of an organization called Gandhi Brigade Youth Media. We are a nonprofit based here in Montgomery County that works with middle school and high school students to create them, to turn them into community leaders. And we do that through media creation. We show them how to use digital media, videography, graphic design, and then we talk to them about the world around us. Ask them what's on their minds, whether it's education, transportation, and these days, it's a lot of consternation over President Donald Trump. And so every summer, we do a special documentary program where we invite youth who are in our programs, which is countywide. We have about 8 different programs. The closest ones to here are at the Praisner Library, and also the Praisner Library, and then further out towards Gaithersburg. But what we do is work with them over a 5-week period and help them create a documentary of their choice. And over the summer, they wanted to do a documentary on immigration reform. And Allyssa is here, and she'll talk with you after you watch the documentary. But it is called The Fabric of America. It is 7 minutes long, and I hope you enjoy it.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
It's a tough time to be an immigrant in America.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies. For amber waves of grain.
The United States is an independent, self-governing country. It has sovereignty and it has a right to decide who should come to the United States and under what conditions they can come here.
But immigrating to the United States is becoming even more difficult. Raids against new residents are on the rise, as are deportations that lead to families and communities being torn apart. Many immigrants attempt to obtain their green cards, but due to the lengthy and complicated process, they ultimately fail. In 1991, 1.8 million immigrants were given their green cards. In 2015, that number had been reduced to 1 million. And in the summer of 2017, President Donald Trump proposed even further cuts, a 50% reduction. Because the process of getting a green card is long and becoming even more difficult, many people resort to staying in the country without proper documentation.
I will be the first member of Congress who was once undocumented as an immigrant. For us immigrants, our commitment to this country isn't always found in our papers, in our documents.
We had the opportunity to interview Congressman Adriano Espaillat. Why did you immigrate to the United States?
We came here, my family, to do better for ourselves, to do better economically, to come to America.
Immigrants have a rich tradition of doing well in America, striving for the American dream. In fact, 40% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or children of immigrants, including Google, Tesla, YouTube, Intel, and Pfizer. For all the contributions that immigrants have made to society, there's still a common misconception that a majority of undocumented immigrants bring crime to the United States.
In fact, most immigrants don't commit a disproportionate level of crime than a regular legal American citizen. I think they commit less crimes, precisely because their status is not determined, and if they do anything like run a red light or something like an infraction, they may be stopped and deported.
Out of the 333,000 deportations in 2015, only 42% had prior criminal convictions, while 58% were peacefully contributing to society.
Immigrants are the teachers who inspire our children, and they're the doctors who keep us healthy. They're the engineers who design our skylines, and the artists and the entertainers who touch our hearts. Immigrants are soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen who protect us, often risking their lives for an America that isn't even their own yet.
Many communities value their immigrant neighbors. One example is Montgomery County, Maryland, next to Washington, D.C., where 38% of the population is foreign-born.
We're coming with our own savvy and experience. We can do things differently, maybe we can contribute better. If we could judge less and not assuming things and underestimating people, I think you can find a lot of potential out there.
But even Montgomery County falls victim to senseless anti-immigrant actions. In August of 2017, 2 brothers were detained and deported while they were reporting for a routine check-in with Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
I'm heartbroken right now. They treat my brothers like they're criminals, and they are not. And they're taking away opportunity to succeed in this country. I can't believe this. And all my family is heartbroken right now and really sad, because it's not fair.
There are some relatives of mine that are undocumented. They haven't committed any crimes. They work and they pay their taxes. So you're willing to deport them for not doing anything wrong?
Your family made a choice to engage in behavior that's prohibited under the laws of the United States. And the fact is that behavior has consequences. So my willingness to enforce the laws of my country and to ensure that the rule of law, which is what makes life in the United States livable and attractive to so many people, is not the problem. The problem is that members of your family chose to violate the laws of the United States, and when the consequences come, they don't like what the consequences are.
Many people forget America's history. We were founded and built by immigrants. Our strength comes from our diversity. And if we continue to welcome everyone with open arms, our country will only get stronger. We are a nation of immigrants.
I am an immigrant.
I am an immigrant.
I am an immigrant. I'm an immigrant.
I'm an immigrant. I am an immigrant. I'm an immigrant. I'm an immigrant.
So I'd like to bring Allyssa up, who you might recognize from the film. Want to share your thoughts?
Hello, my name is Allyssa, and as you can tell, I was the narrator of the documentary. Our goal of the documentary this summer was there's a lot of misconceptions about immigrants, whether they be illegal or legal, and we wanted to shine a light on immigration and let everyone know that immigration is it's perfect. It's the basis of our country, and it's the reason why we have such a diverse culture. And the topic definitely hit close to home because a lot of my family immigrated here from Mexico and El Salvador. So I definitely had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot from making this documentary and visiting the congressman and going to CASA, Maryland, and yeah.
So I think we have like 3 more minutes if anyone has any questions while she's here. Yeah?
That was very brave of you to sit in front of the guy with the white hair. I was very impressed by that. Where did you find the courage to do it, and how did you feel when he was answering the questions the way that he was? Because we over here wanted to hit him.
It was actually my first interview because I was in the documentary program last summer, but I was not the narrator. So I wasn't the one doing the interviews, but this summer, since I was chosen to be the narrator, it was my first interview, and it was definitely very nerve-wracking, but at the same time, I felt pretty confident in our answers because we did a lot of research. Matt O'Brien was the director of research, so we definitely had to do our own research in order to defend our answers. And I mean, I'm open to anyone's opinions, but I support my opinions, and I think during the interview, I don't know if you guys heard, but my voice cracked a lot. That tends to happen when I speak publicly, but I actually wasn't as nervous as I may have sounded, but I mean, it was still very interesting. I went home telling my mom and my grandma like how it went and everything that happened. I think it was like a 10-minute interview. It was cool.
And I'll say that in prepping them for it, we also watched a lot of Michael Moore documentaries. And I showed them, I said, you can still you can be confrontational, but be polite about it and let your voice be heard. And I think Allyssa took me to heart, took Michael Moore to heart.
Where's this movie family showing?
So I appreciate that question. So Gandhi Brigade Youth Media operates about 8 or 9 different locations throughout Montgomery County. This was just debuted at the Montgomery College Cultural Arts Center in Silver Spring, where we had a conversation much like this afterward. And so, because it's a school night, we're not going to be staying for the whole program. But after this, I'll be in the back, and if anyone just wants my card, I'll give it to you, because the whole point of these documentaries is to foster these conversations and let youth voices be heard. Allyssa referenced other documentaries that we've done. One last year was on police accountability, and the year before that was on juvenile justice. And both have won film festival awards across the country, including the DC Independent Film Festival and some others. So they're awesome. And it's GandhiBrigade.org is the website. And one back there. Someone have a question?
Yeah. So what did you learn from the experience? Is it that you want to be a documentary filmmaker? Is it that you learned more about immigration? That, you know, what is your takeaway from the entire experience?
Going into the program this year, I definitely was open to any of the topics that we had listed, but immigration definitely struck to me the most because it hit so close to home. I did care a lot about immigration because of my family, but I didn't know a lot of the background information about immigration. So after the documentary was over, I definitely learned a lot, and I can have discussions about it now and like bring up statistics. And going into the program last year, impact on my life. And so after this year and last year, I definitely, because I'm a senior this year, so next year I'll be going to college, and I want to major in some sort of journalism, whether it be film or writing. And I mean, this program, Gandhi Brigade, has definitely opened me up to the different opportunities and the different roles that I can take on.
And real quick, all too often we talk about young people, but they're rarely in the room with us. And so this program, these films allow that to happen. So invite us, invite her. There are other students. So she's here with us tonight because the others aren't with us because they're actually showing this at AFI tomorrow. There's another, right? Awesome. So.
How can we take your message out to other people? How can we tell them that we have 12 million immigrants here who don't have proper documentation, and that Mr. O'Brien would just send them all back, which is ridiculous? How can we help, we as a community, help your community with immigration questions and spread the message more widely?
I'm a very strong believer in that change begins with discussion, whether it be with 1 or 2 people or a whole group of people like this. And I think that being able to share this documentary with anyone you come across, whether it be someone who's anti-immigration or pro-immigration, that'll definitely spark up conversation, and getting opinions from other sides or from the same side is a way to spread the word. And I mean, just being able to have a discussion overall with a group of people opens up everyone's minds, whether they like it or not. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
There are, those of us here, I would guess, are pretty pro-immigration. And then there are those who are anti-immigration. And then there are those who are neutral. When they watch this movie, do you feel you answered O'Brien's distinction between legal immigration and people who are not here legally?
I think that during the interview we definitely addressed both types of immigration, illegal and legal. In the documentary we wanted to keep it both legal and illegal because those are the two forms of immigration. Our documentary didn't really want to be biased, but we were biased because we are pro-immigration, but we wanted to show both sides of the story, so that's why we included Matt O'Brien in it. But yeah.
And in 7 minutes, there's only so much you can talk about.
Is the congressman still undocumented? And if so, do you know what he's planning on doing? And how he's treated by the other Congress members there?
He's documented. He was able to vote for himself. No. When he moved here, he was undocumented. And for me, that was the biggest thrill for them to walk the halls of Congress and talk to Congressman Espaillat and have an incredible opportunity for them. So thank you all. It's a school night, as I said. We're going to get back, even though senioritis, I think, has sunk in. We're going to get back, but I'll leave some cards in the back. And again, it's GandhiBrigade.org, and thank you all.
So, and now it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Sahar Khamis to talk about the Muslim ban.
Assalamu alaikum. That is the greeting of Islam. It means peace be upon you. And good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks to Indivisible 14 for doing this wonderful job and holding this important event. And thanks to my good friend, Maybe Hassanein, for extending the invitation to me to join this important effort. So this evening I met a very remarkable person, Mr. Kia from the Catholic Immigration Network, who actually is going to share my time talking about the Muslim travel ban. That's very interesting. I'm going to talk about the context and the consequences of the Muslim travel ban, and I'll leave the legal aspect to him to talk about it. And he very generously gave me a number of his cards saying, if you know any Muslim who has been impacted by the Muslim travel ban, please give him or her my card. And I call this the light at the end of the tunnel and the silver lining in this dark cloud, right? It is solidarity. It is people coming out and saying, I stand with you. We don't have to share the same color, the same religion, the same background, the same ethnicity, the same country, but I stand with you. So thank you so much for that, and I'm happy to share my time with you and to give you a chance to talk about the legal aspect of the Muslim travel ban. The context of the Muslim travel ban, we cannot just understand it in terms of certain decisions or decrees that have been taken by the current administration without understanding the bigger picture, because always the bigger picture is really what tells us why and how certain things are happening. As a professor, as an academic, I'm always interested in the why and the how and the context of certain phenomena. So putting it in a wider context, there has been a global and an international rise in what we can describe as the process of populism, the politics of populism, and the rise of right-wing movements, many of which have been sweeping and are sweeping Europe and many parts of the world. And these movements and this sentiment of populism is pretty much based on the notion of fear of the other with capital O. Whoever looks or behaves or dresses differently from us. So whether this person happens to be a Sikh or a Hindu or a Muslim or a black person or an Asian or a Latina, you name it, there's this fear of the other. And these populist movements oftentimes try to instill and to amplify This fear of the other, making people seem as if they're aliens, they're coming from Mars, they're so different from us, we cannot communicate with them, we cannot bridge the gaps or cross over the differences with others. And that, of course, is a very dangerous sentiment, because that explains to us some of the rallies and protests that have been going on. There's been these scary protests going on in Poland recently. I mean, anybody who has seen these rallies really has to be scared, because the new Nazis and people who are pretty much, you know, full of really anger and hatred towards others, whether these others are Muslims or Jews or other minorities, you name it. We have seen in this country what happened in Charlottesville, right, out of all places, this small college town, you know, and we've seen people marching in the street and saying, you will not replace us, Jews will not replace us. So we have to put it in the bigger context, that it's not just about Muslims, it's about others, and it's about minorities, and it's about different ethnic, religious groups who are the minority, whether they're blacks or Jews or Muslims or Latinos, and that's why we have to stand together. We have no other alternative but to show solidarity and to stand with and for each other. From the international global picture to the US picture, there have been 3 waves of Islamophobia here in this country. There's been one wave of Islamophobia that came after the Iran hostage crisis. The second one came after the September 11th, the 9/11 attacks. And the third one came with the latest presidential election, the race and the kind of rhetoric that has been unfortunately dominating this race and characterizing it. And of course, this rhetoric has been also on the rise, of course, after the new administration came into office. And we have seen the escalation. I mean, there are numbers and statistics that show that there has been 67% increase in hate crimes and violence against Muslim communities in this country. And when I say that, I don't mean just somebody looking at you like giving you a dirty look or being upset with you. I mean violent crimes, like throwing, you know, arsenal and explosive devices at mosques, grabbing women and you know, pulling the scarf or the hijab, the headscarf forcibly from their hair, you know, not to mention physical abuse and emotional abuse. I myself have been a resident of Montgomery County, a resident of Silver Spring, Maryland for the last 10 years. And I've always put on my hijab, my headscarf. I never ever encountered one incident where somebody looked at me differently or stared at me, let alone abused me or physically or you know, verbally abused me. Until recently, like a couple of months ago, I told the story, and I would say it again just because it is so, you know, shocking for me, that, you know, I'm living in the very same area, coming out of the metro at 8 p.m., a very normal time. It was not after midnight. It was not like a weird 2 or 3 a.m. thing. And I'm just trying to search in my purse to get something out of my purse, and this guy comes towards me, middle-aged white man, very angry, looks at me and says, "What are you doing? Are you getting a gun out of your purse? Are you getting a gun?" And I said to myself, okay, now it's time to pretend you don't know a single word of English. So I kept a very, very neutral face, looked at him like completely blank, you know, and I just walked by as if I did not understand what he just said. He just followed me with a trail of, you know, cuss words, curse words, dirty language, you name it. I told the story to a police officer later on, and I said, did I do the right thing? Did I do the wrong thing? What did I do? He said, you did the right thing because these guys look for provocation. They want to provoke you, so to get an angry reaction from you, and then it's going to escalate from there. So you absolutely did the right thing by not, you know, engaging him. But after you left the scene, you should have called 911. You should have called the police, because this guy might have issues, and he might be violent, and he might hurt others, and it might not be a good situation to leave him out there in the street like that. So you should have called 911. So that's a lesson to learn. But honestly, that was my only incident that I have experienced in the 10 years I've been living in the very same place, in the very same state, in the very same county, in the very same neighborhood, Silver Spring, Maryland, and it did not happen except recently. So what does that tell us? I mean, the fears are real. The dangers are real. Islamophobia is real. Hatred of the others is real. Anti-Semitism is real. All of these things are real. There are real dangers out there, and they create the context within which these immigration policies are being drafted and created now. Just like we have seen in this fantastic documentary, and I want to definitely encourage this young lady to come and join the Department of Communication at the University of Maryland where I teach, because definitely want to win her as a new correspondent and anchor woman of the future. There is no question about it, right? She's fantastic. I think she had so much guts, so much courage and confidence, right? She was just amazing. So basically, I want to say that, you know, this is really the bigger picture or the broader picture and the context that we have to understand. That is impacting not just the Muslim travel ban that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but also other immigration policies. I'm sure Mr. George will talk about DACA, right? And I had a personal encounter with one of my own students at the University of Maryland, a very smart, bright, Latino young man, right? We had a scholarship at the University of Maryland for diversity, those who are coming from diverse backgrounds. And I took him aside and I said, you know, I think that you should really apply for this scholarship. I think you're qualified, go for it, I will support you, I'll write you a reference letter, apply. And he said, can I come and talk to you in your office privately? I said, sure. He came to my office, I said, go on, what's wrong? He said in a whispering voice, Dr. Khamis, I cannot apply for this scholarship. I said, why? He said, I'm an undocumented immigrant. I'm undocumented, I don't have documents, and I'm afraid to apply for the scholarship because I don't want to be exposed. I don't want to be under the radar of the administration or the officials, basically. I want to keep it low profile. And he did not apply. And I felt like somebody has stabbed me with a dagger in my heart. I mean, that's how bad I felt. I felt so bad. I said to myself, this is one of my best students, very smart, very clever, very talented and capable. Just because he's undocumented, he cannot apply and he's afraid to even, you know, put himself in the spotlight. So that is part of the bigger picture and the bigger context that we all have to feel that we have to stand together to face and to do something about. Now, coming to the Muslim travel ban in particular, the current administration has struggled a lot. They don't want to call it a Muslim travel ban. And of course, we all know that words matter. Words make a huge difference, right? What you call things and what you label things makes a huge difference. And they've been trying to avoid the word Muslim travel ban. No, it's not about Muslims. It's not about, well, look at the countries. Look at the composition of the countries who are covered, who are encompassed under this travel ban. And you don't have to be the greatest thinker of the 21st century to discover that it is a ban indeed targeting Muslims in particular. The composition of the countries is Muslim majority countries. As simple as that. And unfortunately, when you look at these countries, you will see that many of these countries are already troubled countries. They include Syria, a country which is torn by civil war and the worst humanitarian crisis in modern times, period. Millions of refugees, hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives, lost their limbs, got injured, got attacked, their houses were demolished. I know Syrian refugees here who lost more than one of their family members. To deny them access when they are the ones who really need entry into the safe haven of a country like the United States, I don't know how to describe that. Maybe you can help me to find an adjective that would describe that. Other countries are torn by both poverty and violence, like for example Yemen, and some of the poorest countries of the world, Yemen and Somalia. Look at, for example, Iraq, a country that has been torn apart by US invasion. We cannot just turn a blind eye to that and say, oh no, we don't care. We don't care what happens in Iraq. We don't care what happens in Syria. That's not what the United States is all about.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Okay, I see.
It's a tough time to be an immigrant in America.
What a timing. He obviously disagrees with me. So this is a very remarkable moment. Okay. Alright, thank you. So I'm like, what does that tell us? They bring drugs, they're dangerous people, they're rapists. Okay, thank you so much. I got it. Okay, I got it. Yeah, so that was like a time I was like, where's this voice coming from? Okay. So exactly, like, yeah, precisely. So if you look at the bigger picture and look at the bigger context, you see that there are so many people affected by this, because this is not what the United States is all about. The United States indeed is a country of immigrants. It's a country made up of immigrants. And without immigrants, as President Obama said in his speech, definitely there will be no United States as we know it today, not with this level of prosperity and development and advancement and innovation and creativity, and the list can go on and on and on and on. So to curb immigration and to prevent people from entry or re-entry into the United States, specifically if this is done in a way that profiles people, and profiling could be done on the basis of race, ethnicity, color, religion, you name it. This is a form of quote-unquote profiling. There is no question about it. And when you look at these Muslim majority countries, as we said, they're devastated by war, by violence, by internal sectarian strife, by poverty, or by all of these things together. You know, give me, you're poor, right? You're sick, you're tired. That should be the philosophy that this country has been based on and has been built on, and that is the philosophy we should all continue to stand by and stand with for many years to come. Again, the Muslim travel ban is just one piece of the bigger picture. Look at the attempt of the current administration to cut the diversity lottery visa. I have been on an interview recently on BBC Arabic television, and the interview was specifically about the diversity lottery visa, right? And my position was, that this should not happen, people should be given opportunities, people should be given chances, and the person on the other side, and when I say the other side, I mean the other side of the interview, but also more importantly, the other side of the political spectrum, was like, no, we should not allow these people in according to lottery visa, we should be much more strict, we should try to really scrutinize people and look at them more carefully and look at their backgrounds. And I said, listen, people are vetted. Don't think that Syrians, for example, Syrian refugees, they spent years and years before coming to the US under a very, very serious and tough vetting process. It's not like, sure, you're a Syrian refugee, come to our country. It's not like that. There is very serious vetting that happens and takes place before people come to the country. The same could be done with the lottery visa. 11 million people applied last year for the lottery diversity visa, only 50,000 were accepted. So I mean, there's a lot of vetting that takes place, and you can always check people's background, but you should not deny them access. He was not convinced, and he said, oh, this is just an emotional argument. And for the first time, I found myself making faces on camera. So I think I was like astonished, and my eyes were like that, wide open, and I raised my eyebrows. I could not help it, but I just went like that on camera. Like, why did he call it emotional? And a friend of mine says, that's what people say when they cannot find a good argument to respond to what you're saying. They will just say, oh, it's emotional. Especially they're more encouraged to do so if the speaker is a woman. Oh, she's just being emotional. No, I'm not. I am being rational. You are the one who is not being rational enough in your argument. But out of all of this came some good light. Out of all of this fear and apprehension and all of the panic and the pain, very, very positive things are coming out of all of this. And that's where the part about the consequences comes in. So we gave the context of it, but the consequences, of course, the bad part is obvious and clear. I don't even need to delve into it because it's so obvious. People who are scared, families that are broken up, people who cannot be united, students who are denied education and opportunities, like the mother who was crying in the documentary when she said, my family, they're not criminals. You're denying them the opportunity to have access to education and to build a brighter future in the United States, and this is not acceptable. All of these are very obvious consequences on the negative side that I don't need to even remind you of because you know them very well. But what are some of the positive things that came out of all of that? Did some positive things come out of all of that? Absolutely yes. Definitely there is a silver lining in this dark cloud. I am a member of a different number of interfaith groups. One of them is called Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, which brings together hundreds and hundreds of Muslim and Jewish women. And in our annual conference, that was after the elections and the election results last year, the Jewish sisters were asked, if, God forbid, there will be a Muslim registry in this country, how many of you is willing to register as a Muslim? And everybody stood up. It was like a crowd of 500 women. And I was so touched. I was personally very touched. And we saw the marches on the streets. We saw the marches against the travel ban, against the Muslim travel ban. We saw thousands and thousands of people from all different religions and colors and ethnicities coming out and saying, I stand with you, I stand by you, and I stand for you. We saw the fantastic lawyers, right, who went to the airport completely volunteering their time and effort. They're not getting a single penny, and they're sitting on the floor, right? On the ground, both literally and metaphorically, right? On the ground, helping people who have been stopped at the airport, people who were not allowed access, denied access into the country. They were out there helping them and writing petitions for them and doing all the paperwork which is needed for them legally without getting a single penny. Complete volunteers. We have seen these fantastic judges in the US court who exercise the system of checks and balances, and thank God for checks and balances in this country, right? They made their voice heard and they made their voice very clear and very loud. We are judges in the US court and we are saying no to the Muslim travel ban, and we are saying this is not going to happen, not under our watch. We have seen campuses and cities and towns calling themselves sanctuary. Sanctuary cities and towns and campuses saying we love our neighbors and we love our students and we will not allow them to be discriminated against or to be expelled or to leave this country or not to be allowed entry into this country based on the race, color, ethnicity, or religion. All of that, my brothers and sisters, gives me a lot of hope, and it gives me a lot of, feeling of confidence and strength and solidarity, and that is the light that's coming out of all of this. Before I leave the microphone, let me just tell you one last thing. There is one documentary I would love for you to watch on YouTube if you ever have a chance. It is called American Muslims, Facts versus Fiction. American Muslims, Facts versus Fiction. It is a Unity Productions Foundation documentary, and it's available on YouTube. The reason I want you to watch it is very simply put because it answers all the claims that the current administration is using in order to discriminate against Muslims and to keep them out. One by one. It tries to say, okay, if you think that Muslims are new to this country, this is not their home, right? We have oftentimes seen people who are against immigration or against immigrants. They will write messages on the wall that says, go back home. We don't want you here. You have no home here. While in fact, a lot of these American Muslims, they don't know any other home except this place. This is their home. Many of them were born in the United States on US soil. Many of them do not know any other home or any other place except the United States. This is their home. So when you say go back home, it means you are assuming that these are newcomers and they don't belong here in this country, and this is not their home and this is not their place, which is absolutely false. Also, the documentary answers the claim that, Muslims are extremists and terrorists and fanatics. Well, there are 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, right? And only a very, very small, tiny fringe, obviously, join extremist groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS. And there are so many Muslim clerics and opinion leaders and speakers and community leaders who came out in the thousands and spoke out against terrorism and said, this is not Islam. These terrorists do not represent us. They are not Muslims and they do not represent us, and this is not what Islam is all about. And when I get asked the question, why aren't Muslims speaking out? Well, they are speaking out, and they're speaking out in large numbers, but the media does not show them. And that's why we have the responsibility, every and each one of us, to amplify the message in our own way and to make sure our voices are heard. Just like we saw this beautiful young lady and her documentary this evening, we need more voices to be amplified and to be heard loudly and clearly. And finally, I am very pleased to give the platform to Mr. Kia from the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. Listen to that, Catholic Legal Immigration Network, speaking on the legal aspect of the Muslim travel ban and speaking about how he and his group are doing the best they can to help their fellow Muslim brothers and sisters. This is big, this is solidarity, and this is the light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, first of all, for coming here. I see very different faces here. That means that at least because of this travel ban or because of this new situation that we have here in this country, we are celebrating our diversity here, which is great. So, as Dr. Khamis said, there are so many downsides to travel ban, but also there are some good news about what's going on. And one of them is the spirit of solidarity in the community and the society. We see people that, before hearing about this travel ban, they didn't know what a Muslim is, and they didn't really care. But now, whenever they find an opportunity, they try to find out what's going on. And they say, yeah, I think we have somebody in our neighborhood who is a Muslim. Let's see if he or she wants something. And I often see, for example, I think it was 3 or 2 days ago, I was just driving in Potomac, and I saw a big sign in front of the house. It was written in Farsi, Arabic, and English, and the phrase was, no matter where you were born, we are happy that you are our neighbor. So, you couldn't see such things before, but now you can see. So thank you so much for coming here, and also thank you for inviting me here and giving the opportunity. I know Dr. Khamis had lots of things to say and share with you, and most probably that would be more beneficial for you to speak to her than me, but she was so generous to give me her time so that I can share some points, basically legal aspects of this travel ban with you. So let me start with a very brief summary of the legal developments that we have had. And before I start that, let me introduce myself again. My name is Razaghi. I have a license to practice law here, but I never consider myself a lawyer in terms of what you see, normally in TV shows or even these courts, those people who just try to find the most accurate word and then, they keep their distance with everybody. No. So I was working for myself as a solo practitioner. And in my life, I have never been an employee. I really hate to be an employee. So I was never thinking about getting a job with a law firm or something. I just had my own small law office. But like 8 months ago, I heard that Clinic, Catholic Legal Immigration Incorporation, was hiring an attorney who could speak Farsi, Arabic, knows some English, and then is willing to help the people who are affected by the travel ban. And they were hiring an attorney because they were starting a project that, thanks to generous donation of Mr. David Trump, they were able to have a project to support the people who are affected by the Muslim ban. So for the first time in my life, I got tempted of applying for a job like that, and being an asylum myself from Iran, I ended up here, messing up with the Iranian government. I had ended up in the United States as a political asylee. And then when I told my wife that, okay, I want to go and apply for that position with Clinic, she told me, look, you messed up with the Iranian government, you ended up here, now you want to mess with the American government, and when do you want to go? You want to go to And, well, I just assured her that at least so far in this country, we say like peace. Nobody can persecute you because of doing your job. So let's go back to the brief summary of the legal developments regarding the travel ban. Look, we have had like 3 versions of travel ban. And I always say that this travel ban, this phenomenon of travel ban, has been like a virus. Those intelligent and smart viruses, that when you just treat one version of them, the next version will be more smart and, you know, more resistant to medications. That's the same thing that is happening with, you know, the versions of the travel ban that we see. The first version, when it came out, it was, you know, just everybody was hesitating. Was the lawyer involved in writing these texts? Because it was so evident that it was against very basic values of this country. It was against the Constitution, even the language that was over there, you know, so you couldn't really believe that somebody, a legal mind, was even editing the language over there. So I think it took the course in this country less than 24 hours just to stop it. You know, the judges didn't have a hard time to do that. But the second version of that was smarter. I think the government learned from the ideas and the orders of the courts, and they found out what are those weak points of the first version, so they tried to make it something that can legally survive according to the law of the United States. Again, when they issued that, the second version, the courts also liked that version. You know, the federal courts first liked it, then the government appealed that. The Court of Appeal also said in this country that no, it's unconstitutional, Mr. Trump, you can't do that. And then fell to the Supreme Court, and well, you know, Supreme Court has been always a mixture of law and politics, you know, because there are 9 justices over there, so they are appointed, you know, by presidents, and then, you know, and the last justice who just replaced the late Justice Scalia is appointed by President Trump, so he is, I think, politically closer to his political viewpoints. So the Supreme Court said that, okay, let's keep people from these 6 countries out of the United States with an exception. And that exception are those people who have a bona fide relationship with an individual or entity in the United States. Meaning that if you have a family member, close family member in the United States, you can apply for a visa. Or if you are admitted in an academic program here, like you have an admission from a university, you can apply for a visa. But the government was not really satisfied with this. Then they issued the third travel ban. And as I said, they learned from their mistakes, or they learned from the legal debates that were around the second travel ban. So they try to involve some non-Muslim nations like North Korea or Venezuela, for example, in this third version of travel ban, to just say that it's not about Muslim countries, or it's not about the countries with, in which the majority of the population are Muslim. But, you know, no one from North Korea, I think, dares to apply for a visa to come to the United States, because even if the government of our government gives them a visa, then, you know, when they go back to North Korea, I think they will have a hard time, you know, maybe with crocodiles or so. So basically, again, it is about Muslims, you know. Despite the fact that they try to involve some other names, say North Koreans cannot come here, or the people who have a high-ranking position in the government of Venezuela, they can't come here. But it's mostly about Muslims again. So it also took like 3 or 4 days for the courts to block the third version also. And it seems that the judge in Hawaii, Judge Watson, no matter what President Trump writes in that travel agreement, he is going to block it, you know. So everybody knows that, yeah, there will be an order from Hawaii and they will block it. Because that judge really thinks that this is the basic idea of traveling, of putting a travel ban, like putting a blanket on a whole nation. It is so un-American and is against the constitution of this country. And also, lots of other judges. The judge in Maryland also blocked that partially. So the government was in a very bad situation because in the second travel ban, at least they could bar the people who don't have a bona fide relationship with American entities or individuals from coming to the United States. But when the courts blocked the third version of the travel ban, actually there was no travel ban. So anybody could come here and anybody could apply for a visa. So they applied for, or they asked for emergency stay. I just don't want to use the legal terminology here. It just means that you basically go to the judge and say, oh, we have this very emergency situation, please stay or stop the order of the court. So they went to the Court of Appeal and asked the Court of Appeal, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, to just stop or grant the emergency stay for the order of the court in Hawaii. And unfortunately, today, just 30 minutes ago, or 45 minutes ago, I heard that the Ninth Circuit, the judges over there, they said, okay, let's go back to the standard that the Supreme Court gave us regarding this second version of the travel ban. And again, we can let the people who have a bona fide relationship with American entities and individuals to come here, but all the other people cannot apply for the visa at this time. So this is how it's going on. And this has been one of my problems, I can say, in giving advice to the community. Because you see, there are so many versions of this travel ban, so many interpretations, and when a court order comes out, USCIS issues its own version of manual or instructions to its employees, just instructing them how to enforce that order of the court. And then, I don't know, Department of State also sends some instructions to the embassies. So you have lots of new information coming out, and you need to absorb all these things, analyze them, and then give legal advice to people. And also another problem is that the courts in this country, I think they work 24 hours. Because back in Iran, after 4 p.m. courts were closed. But now we hear that at 6 p.m. a judge issued an order. So we should be on alert 24 hours. Anyway, so this is I think the summary of the legal aspects of the travel ban that we see. The most important problem, I think, at this time, if we want to speak about it, is something that they call it administrative process, which is another name for background checks. So even if you have a bona fide relationship with somebody in the United States, even if you want to come to the United States from Iran or Syria or I don't know, Yemen, to see your child here or your grandchildren here, they don't tell you that you don't qualify for that or you are barred because of this travel ban, but they say, okay, you need to go through that administrative process. And as Sahar said, we always had a process for checking the background of people for coming here to the United States, especially after September 11th. The security measures for vetting the people was very tough. So before this new administration, that administrative process was just 3 or 4 months for most of the people. That's the problem right now. So if somebody in the community asks you about these, I think, or for example, you have a neighbor, somebody who is a Muslim from these countries, and asks you if his father or mother can apply for a visa, you can say under this new interpretation of the travel ban and the order of the court, yes, they basically can apply for that, but they may end up in a background check which may last forever. 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, and no one can do anything regarding that. So I spoke at least 10 minutes more than what I was authorized to, so I do apologize, and I would be happy to answer any question after. Don't panic, I'm not going to take the question after this event, and I would be happy to give you some of my business cards so that you can refer the people to our program, the people who need our help. Thank you.
And now it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Mr. George Escobar, Senior Director of Human Service for CASA.
And good evening, everybody. I think we're kind of going a little bit late in the evening, so I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. And I really look forward to answering your questions most of all, because I think a lot of the subjects I wanted to touch on today, many of you may be a little familiar with. But I think it's important to talk a little bit about, put the situation we're living in right now a little bit more in context, very similar to the conversations we were having previously with the other presenters, right? I think, as you come to understand and try to resist some of these initiatives from the Trump administration, it's also important to remember how we got to this point in the first place, right? I was talking to some folks last night, actually, and I spoke a little bit about my dad, because my dad first came to this country during one of the bigger migration movements from Mexico into the United States, a member of this temporary guest worker program that was called the Bracero program, which some of you guys might have been familiar with. This was a program that specifically recruited villagers, laborers in Mexico, and brought them to the fields in California to farm those fields. Now, they couldn't find anybody else in the country to farm those fields, and there was an incredible need to expand the agricultural sector so to feed the rest of the country, this post-World War times, right? You had that program that about 4 million Mexicans participated in, right, over the span of about 20 years. That created huge migrations, right, from Mexico into this country. Again, during a period in which immigrants were welcomed here for what? For their labor and the cheap salaries and the cheap wages that they were farming those fields with, right? Very convenient for the country to welcome immigrants when they really needed them for some sort of economic reason, right? You fast forward from those years when the Bracero program ended. It ended mostly because of the egregious human rights violations that a lot of the planters were subjecting a lot of the laborers to, right? And it became an embarrassment to the government because they couldn't control some of the violations. People were kept in substandard housing, they were exploited, the wages were horrible, and then they cut the program off. Then what happened? Then we had a huge, massive wave of deportations that hit the country, right? You guys might have heard of it. It had a really cool name. It was called Operation Wetback, all right? And it deported all of these Mexicans, a great amount of Mexicans back into Mexico, right? And that was the solution. Fast forward again and again, you have an expanding economy, you have a lot of factors going on with in Central America, with the interference of the U.S. government in the Cold Wars in Central America. You might have remembered in Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, all over the place, causing these huge waves of migration, again to the north, but also conveniently at that time, there was a need for that labor. There was a suburbanization going on in the country, right? There are actually places like this that were getting developed, and we needed again cheap labor, and we needed these workers to come in, right? Again, for another economic reason. Well, now what's happened, right? We have another protectionist regime taking over the United States government, now scapegoating the immigrant community, and again, looking to bring back the past and make America great again, back to the days of Operation Wetback, right, where we can deport these people and classify them, and even manufacture undocumented people that we can deport. And that's essentially what's going on now, and I think it's important. This is an oversimplification, of course, of decades and years of policy, but I think it's important also to realize how these things kind of come to be, right? How you create also, how you scapegoat a population, and how you use them when it's convenient for you, and you turn your back on them when it's not, right? And I think that's exactly what's happening. We can go into in depth in the reasons why Trump won, and you can talk about the 2016 election, about the forgotten, man that has lost his industrial work or industrial jobs all over the Rust Belt, and that created, a perfect storm that elected Trump. But at the foundation of all of that, as you saw, really beautifully done by Alyssa's video, you saw that first image we saw of Trump when he announced his campaign, right? Who do you think he was talking about when he said they're bringing in their drugs? Some of them, I guess, are nice people. He was talking about my people. He was talking about Mexicans, and he said it straight up, right? So it was really interesting the way we kind of see this kind of repeat itself, right? And then, but let's look at the facts. And I'm talking in the historical context of immigration, but let's talk about the facts right now, right? This country is really at a net neutral in terms of immigration. There's just as many, and this counts people from all over the world, there's just as many people coming into this country as are people leaving the country, right? The borders are not being flooded by huge waves of immigrants coming over, either from Muslim countries, Asian countries, or Latin American countries. There's just as many people coming in as leave. And these are historic trends that we've seen over the past 20 years. What is the crisis? Why do we need to spend so much money on immigration enforcement? Right now, the Trump administration is working on a plan to hire another 20,000 troops to enforce the borders and to secure the border. He wants to put in billions of dollars to create a huge, gigantic, beautiful wall with a pretty little golden door, just like he described, right? Why? What is he responding to? Again, what is the crisis? If we're at net neutral in terms of statistically, why is there such an emphasis on immigration enforcement, on this scapegoating of our immigrant community, right? And when you think about all these things, it should really motivate us for action, right? It should really want us to not only resist Trump, right? To not only try to survive these next 3 years that we're under this administration, but make true, meaningful change that will destroy these historical patterns that we keep seeing, that will destroy the scapegoating of immigrants, that we don't see immigrants just as economic tools to revitalize our economy, that we see them for who they are, families, right? People that are coming here for another opportunity, people that are the most highly employed individuals, because that is statistically proven. Immigrants are less likely to commit a crime than the population in general. Employment is usually a lot higher in all immigrant communities as opposed to the rest of the citizenry. Now that's not to say that they're getting the best wages, right? Many of them have 2-3 jobs just to survive, but they are employed and are significantly contributing to not only the economy, but enriching our society and all, right? And how are we seeing the Trump administration respond to this? And again, it's what I was trying to describe earlier. He's actually in the process of manufacturing and creating more undocumented folks in this country, in addition to the 11 million that we already have. We see that through the DACA program. I'm sure by now you guys are all familiar with the DACA program. DACA program, again, over 800,000 youth that have been granted a 2-year employment authorization that is renewable at the end of those 2 years, right? And these folks, again, these folks do not have a pathway to citizenship. These are folks not gaining legal permanent residency. These are folks that, honestly, if they didn't have a job, wouldn't even qualify to participate in Obamacare and in the Affordable Care Act. All they have is a measly, ridiculous employment authorization card that is only available for them in a 2-year span, for which they have to pay a fee for, right? That is it, that's DACA. And Trump is even getting rid of that, right? TPS is another very important program for our community. And again, people that have TPS, the temporary protected status, this is really similar to DACA. Again, it's a work authorization card. This one is even less than DACA. It's 18 months in which they have authority to work. That again is renewable, depending on the decision of the executive and the Department of Homeland Security. And we have over 300,000 people of these nationwide. These are folks that were granted this kind of temporary authorization as a result of being victims of some sort of natural disaster that happened in their home country. We have people from Nicaragua, we have people from Honduras, we have people from El Salvador, and Haiti. You all remember the Haitian earthquake of 2010, in addition to a smattering of other countries throughout Africa and Asia that have authority, that have access to this program. Again, these are people that have to prove that they came to this country because of that natural disaster, right? And there's over 300,000 of those. Again, only have employment authorization. And Trump has decided to eliminate that program. He's going country by country and eliminating that. He already eliminated that program for the Haitians. And the Haitians have until the end of December to leave the country. You all know Haiti, right? I think it's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. To the Trump administration, everything's fine. That's a beautiful country. They're ready to go back. He has declared the same for Nicaragua, and he's basically given a 6-month extension for Honduras, which of course we all know Honduras is a place we all vacation to every summer because it's very safe, nothing going on there. And El Salvador is the largest country with TPS designation. 200 of those 300,000 people that have TPS come from El Salvador. That decision must be made by basically January because their authorization ends in March. So what typically happens is the government gives a 60-day notice before the end of that employment authorization period to let folks know yay or nay they're staying or they're leaving. And 2/3 of those folks are from El Salvador. Just so you know the impact that this manufacturing of undocumented folks has on our local community. Here in the state of Maryland, although DACA gets a lot of play, and we hear about DACA all the time, there's more than twice as many people with TPS in the state of Maryland than there are with DACA. And folks that have had TPS, in the large majority, have been in this country for nearly 20 years since it was first designated in about 2001. And these are folks, to be honest, you may know the tons of these people that have TPS and don't even know it. Why? Because these are middle-class folks. They've had nearly 20 years in the country. Many of them, and studies have shown, about 70% of them have mortgages. About just as many have U.S. citizen children. There's a significant number of small business owners. We, in fact, organized a huge group of truck owners, of people that independently, drive their own trucks, and have their CDL licenses. There's an extraordinary amount of economic contributions that this population alone has given, especially to our local communities. And what we're seeing is the elimination of all these programs, right? So what are we going to do about it? is a question a lot of people ask, right? These decisions are made at the federal level. Oh, I've talked to my congressman. My congressman's a Democrat. He's totally against Trump. It's great. You know, they say they're an ally of the immigrant community. Well, I think now is the time to demand a lot more of our representatives. And by a lot more, I mean not only saying that you're for us, but that you're our champion, right? Especially when it comes to the issues of TPS. Nobody, you know, we're disproportionately going to be affected by the TPS crisis because, again, like I said, about 24,000 people in the state of Maryland have TPS, twice as many as have DACA. That's not the case in a lot of other parts of the country, right? There's people in Illinois, there's representatives in Oregon that may have like no idea of what TPS is. So the urgency is to convert our allies in Congress into champions and champion legislation and put forward strong arguments with their colleagues to preserve these people, to keep these people in the United States, keep them contributing to our economies and to our societies, right? Because I think there is a huge sense of complacency on the part of the Democratic Party, right? They think immigrant issues, check, we're good. No, it's not the time to be good, and it's not the time to say that they're just for us. It's time for them to be our champions. Locally, we need to figure out in our local councils, in our local state legislatures, we have to make sure that our local police and our local enforcement agencies are not collaborating with ICE, right? Because now, at this point, ICE ICE has full discretion to do whatever they want with any person of color. Can question them for any reason, can deport them for basically any reason, right? And this is the dangerous intersection between local law enforcement and ICE, because what we're seeing is that relationship is one of the main pipelines to deporting the majority of our communities. Relationships at ICE, because we've seen it actually on the street. We've seen cops pull over people for a broken tail light. Before you know it, this person is being deported. ICE has full discretion to engage at all levels in our community to deport people, right? And since the Trump administration is removing the few protections that our immigrant community has, our community is incredibly vulnerable to this type of abuse. So we have to demand accountability. No, local law enforcement does not need to inform ICE of any enforcement activity that they're conducting when it's a routine activity, right? Nobody wants gangs. Nobody wants crime in our communities. And believe me, there's plenty of joint operations that are legally bound and legally admitted, and they're not voluntary at all. Federal agencies are engaging in those efforts constantly. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing your local Joe Blow cop, who just happens to be anti-immigrant, is actually making a phone call to his brother, to his friend, Joe Blow ICE agent, just because he sees a brown person driving a car, and he doesn't like that brown person. This is literally what's happening on the ground, right? We need to demand accountability from our police officers. We need to demand accountability from our county executives, from our county councils, from our state delegates, to create policies that uphold the Constitution and due process, and make sure that people aren't subjected to the deportation dragnet for just being brown and walking on the street on an evening, walking from their business to their house, which is literally how people are being picked up nowadays. So again, oversimplifying a lot of stuff, and I know on each one of these issues we can have a very long conversation, but my overall message to you is really demand accountability and demand champions of our elected representatives. If this issue is really important to you, you are the voice that people will listen to. You are voting in your elections. You are the constituency that our elected representatives are most listening to. Unfortunately, many members of our population do not have that advantage because, for the same reasons we've been talking about, been scapegoated in the past and have not allowed a pathway to citizenship. So if this subject is something you care very deeply about, remember, you're doing this not only out of your own sense of social justice, but also the responsibility of speaking for others that don't have the opportunity to engage their elected representatives. All right? My last plug of the day will be, as you all know, CASA, we like to march, we like to protest and get arrested every once in a while. So we have a big event on December 6th, which I hope you can join us for. December 6th, we're going to do a rally right outside of Capitol Hill. Why do we want to do it that day? Number of reasons. We see DACA and we see the DREAM Act floundering, right? I think that's nobody's surprise. Trump has rescinded DACA, and essentially the last applications have already been submitted to renew those applications. The program is now dead. He said, let Congress act. Well, Congress isn't acting, big surprise, right? And we face a real crossroads now because we know the Republicans have said, fine, we'll keep DACA, but in exchange, we want the wall and we want 20,000 more troops. Right? And I call them troops. When I say troops, I'm talking about paramilitary ICE enforcement agencies, ICE enforcement agents, and that's the way I want you guys to remember. These are paramilitary troops, right? These are people that are allowed to separate our families and divide our families, and be allowed to patrol our neighborhoods and hunt and profile anybody that they see that's brown and ask them for papers, right? So we already spend, and this is true, you can look it up, between Customs and Border Patrol and ICE enforcement agencies, we spend over $13 billion a year on enforcement. And we already have 40,000 of these troops between Customs and Border Protection and ICE immigration enforcement. And what did I just say? We're at basically net neutral, right? We don't have Mexicans coming to this country anymore, and the numbers they used to, right? So that has basically created net neutral numbers in terms of how many people are coming into this country as opposed to how many are leaving. What we have today are actually people, the immigrants that are coming to this country are now essentially refugees, right? The largest proportion of immigrants coming into the country now through the southern border are coming from 3 specific countries in Central America, right? Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And why? Because their country is falling apart and it's been taken over by these gangs that, FYI, we've exported from this country, right? I'm from LA, so I know most of these gangs growing up, and now, because they've all been deported, they've taken over a whole lot of municipalities and cities and villages in these 3 countries, and the government doesn't have the institutional capacity to be able to fight this crisis in a real effective manner. So what do people do when they face that kind of crisis? Are they going to sit there and wait to die, or wait for their children to be harassed? No, just like anybody else, they're going to look for better opportunities and they're going to try their best. And if they die trying, they're going to die trying. But they're going to try to come to a country they think is going to lead them to a better life. Those are the types of immigrants in the large majority that we're seeing now, right? And taking that, and it pains me to say this because again, I love Mexico, but the journey that these people are taking across my country is really not only traumatic, but many times leads into the death and maiming of many of these folks, right? And how do we greet them when we come here? We don't have a way to allow them status. Why? Because they don't qualify for refugee status, right? Because we have an antiquated immigration system. And again, when we talk about immigration reform, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a system that is based on a world that existed 50, 60 years ago when my father first immigrated to this country, right? It doesn't allow for people like coming from El Salvador that are fleeing gangs that have overridden their villages to be allowed an opportunity to find status in this country. Why? Because a refugee here is defined in a very specific way, right? They have to prove that They're being persecuted by their government because of their ethnicity, because of their religion, or something of the matter. There's nothing on the box, and there's no checkbox there that says gangs or violence, right? So unfortunately, we don't have the institutional laws. We don't have the laws to protect these folks. So they resign themselves to a life of undocumented status unless we do something about it, right? And again, this is what I say when we talk about trying to get involved, not just to save TPS, not just to save DACA, but really reform the system in a way that makes sense for our communities moving forward, and a way in which we can really learn from the crises we're experiencing today. Okay, so sorry. Back to December 6th, real quick. Final thing. I hope you all can join us on December 6th. Again, it's a day that we're asking folks to be in solidarity with our immigrant community. Our immigrant community is fed up and tired of this scapegoating and this piecemeal attack on their identity. And we want to let Congress know that they need to act. We choose December 6th because it's right around the budget battles that we know are going to happen. And honestly, if we don't have an opportunity to bring up a clean DREAM Act, if we don't have an opportunity to put up a clean TPS protection bill, which everybody says, well, there's nothing we can do about it because the Republicans control Congress, then let's use the budget negotiations as a way in which we can amend and provide amendments that will protect our community. So I hope I can see you December 6th. If you can be there by 10 o'clock, it'd be great. We'll start at 12. If you want to get arrested, you can see me later. Thank you very much.
I wanted to make an announcement. We have another event at MCC at the same time, same format pretty much, called Stop Rohingya Genocide. So it's a call to action and community gathering for humanity. So it's organized by 3 organizations, MCC being one of them, and then I think the Badish Foundation, and then Burma Task Force. So it'll start at 7, same place, same time, I guess I just said that. On Friday, this Friday, this coming Friday. Yeah, November 17th. All right.
I want to thank you all for being a good audience and listening to our many speakers. I was reading something recently, and it was about Paul Wellstone, Senator Paul Wellstone. How many know of him? He was a progressive senator from Minnesota and died tragically in a plane accident. And his idea was that government exists to make things better for people. And we have a government now that is existing to try to make things worse for people. So my few words are a call to action to try to make our government work for all of us. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Mimi, but I think this is what we need people to think about. How can we make our government work for us and work for all of us? So I'm giving you that charge before you leave, and we'll go back to questions and answers.
I wanted to thank my dear friend and my colleague, Nestor Alvarez, who is work with me. He's the Latino liaisons at the Office of Community Partnership. And when I told him I need the best from DACA, he sent me George. So thank you so much. Okay, so we're gonna go, anybody have any question? And if you need a mic, okay, go ahead, Chris.
So I have an observation and a question. The observation is perhaps they could take the money that they're using for the storm troops to pay for their tax breaks. And my question is I've heard that ICE agents will act as if they have police powers, act as if they're allowed to come into your house and things like that. And through that kind of bullying tactic, they get more people than they might if the people insisted on their rights. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely, and I think you saw it a little bit in the video too. Again, great job by Allyssa. And you'll see that the majority of people, the grand majority, and these numbers, this proportion is increasing as the Trump administration has more time. The number of people that are actually deported that are not the actual targets of the enforcement activities and have absolutely no criminal background is increasing. Right now, over the past 4 or 5 months, that proportion now is around 70 to 75% of those folks. Over the past couple of years, it's been steadily at more than 60%. That's why, we've been one of our major initiatives is doing robust Know Your Rights campaigns, right? Because thankfully there's still laws in this country, right? And although you may be undocumented, but you still have civil rights in this country, right? You still have the right to remain silent, and you still, if somebody's knocking on your door at 3 o'clock in the morning, unless they have a court order to enter the premises, you're under no obligation to open that door, right? And what we're seeing is, again, because these ICE agents and these stormtroopers are actually really lazy, they never have a court order. I've never seen a court order, actually, with any of our clients that have come to CASA and have a deportation case. I've never seen a court order that they presented that resulted in their detention, right? Those are only in cases where there's significant criminal background. But at the same time, ICE has that information, and this is why we're afraid of the elimination of DACA program, the TPS program, because these are people that voluntarily submitted their information, their private information, to get the immigration benefit. And once that ends, there's nothing stopping ICE from getting that information and going directly to those houses. So that's why sharing those rights with folks and and having engagements such as this, and also you going out in your own networks and advising your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues about their rights, it is really, really important.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, maybe I'm going to just.
Okay. All right.
I do agree that language is so important, just like you spoke about. And what happened in Las Vegas, what happened in Texas, that was a mental health issue, that was, we shouldn't have guns, you shouldn't be giving guns to certain people, background checks, blah, blah, but what happened in New York, that was a terrorist act. And to me, that is just so problematic. How do we change the language? Because the people who are dead are still dead, their families are still grieving. So whether it's somebody who does not look like Donald Trump commits the act, or whether somebody no matter who commits the act, the people are still dead. Absolutely. And so we need to find some way to change the language rather than just have, like you said, the other be the ones who are being looked upon as problematic.
Well, thank you so much for asking my favorite question about the double standards in terms of the stereotyping and images and media coverage and who gets called a terrorist and who does not get this label. And you mentioned some of these most tragic incidents that took place recently and that really left many people, dead, and tragic shootings, and all of that, of course, opens the door for a lengthy discussion about the importance of having laws against gun control, but it also opens a very important discussion about how we actually depict and portray and profile and label people who commit these horrific acts, right? If it happens to be someone who has a dark skin, a brown person who has a foreign name, and even better, has a Muslim name, then the label terrorist gets immediately attached to him in no time. And you get all the news networks saying, oh yeah, the terrorist attack happened. If a horrible attack happens, and as we saw, many people dead and so on and so forth, like you said, the dead person is still dead, and the horror happened no matter who is the person who did it, you don't get the label terrorist. Oh, let's look into the case. Maybe this person is mentally unstable. There's always the ready excuse if that's a white person. Let's put it very frankly and bluntly. There's always the mental illness excuse is always there. So that's the double standards, and that is why we do need what is called alternative media. I do not trust the mainstream media, with all due respect, to do the job. I do believe strongly that we need to have alternative media platforms that can really convey a much more balanced, much more fair, much more accurate picture of what is really happening and put things in the right perspective and avoid all of the negative stereotyping and labeling, which is simply not fair, not balanced, and not accurate. Let me just very quickly mention two quick things I did not mention in my talk very quickly. When we talk about the Muslim travel ban, oftentimes the borders also affect people who are not Muslims. Just to give you one quick case, there was this case of a Yemeni Jew who was not allowed to enter the United States after the first travel ban because the travel ban included Yemen. And the person is not a Muslim, Jewish actually, right? But was affected and impacted by the travel ban. And the same can happen to any Jews or Christians or people of other faiths who happen to be also citizens in these countries. So it's not just, like I said before, it's not just about Muslims. We have to think collectively about how this is impacting every and each one of us across our different faith communities and different ethnic and racial groups. And finally, I think that the latest election results in Virginia and New Jersey and New York are speaking volumes about the direction that people like you and me want this country to go into, right? This is not a victory for Democrats only, it's a victory for democracy itself. It's a victory for the American people who want to see good in this country and want America to be kind again. And as a newly minted American citizen myself, I take upon myself the responsibility to take my voting responsibility very seriously, to make sure I vote in each and every election and make my voice heard, because it's time for us to stand united together with and for each other.
Wow. All right. You need a mic?
I believe that the Canadians have a much more efficient and effective system, especially when it comes to temporary guest workers. And it's run by the government, that the guest workers are properly treated, they're brought in on more or less on a contract basis, they're allowed to go home and then return the following year. And because it is so properly managed and there's no exploitation or abuse of the guest workers, apparently it works very well. Now, I don't know what they do about the other people that come to Canada that are undocumented. I don't know how they're treated. I haven't heard much comment about that, and I'd like to know what you can, if you're aware of how the Canadians handle the situation. It doesn't seem to be nearly the problem that we have.
That's a question for me. That would be a better question.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a particular expert in Canada. I'll say a couple of things. You know, I'm not a particular fan, as you probably heard, of guest worker programs in general. Again, I think because they reduce the needs of the immigrant into this really compartmentalized economic being, right? Again, people come to this country for opportunity, but they also want their families to benefit from this opportunity, right? So historically, our immigration system was based on family-based immigration, right? That's why U.S. citizens are allowed an opportunity to petition for their wife, for their spouses, for their children, and for their relatives, right? I think that'll be, once we're in a different administration, in a different world, I think that's when we get into a real good debate about what real immigration reform looks like, and we start looking at best practices from across the country. I know of a lot of Mexican nationals in particular that have benefited from temporary guest worker programs in Canada. But you know, I wouldn't necessarily say that those are necessarily like models to live by, because there's still significant roots that those communities make in those particular communities, and providing workers an opportunity to live in a safe environment with their families, I think, is what we really want to strive for, right? We want to strive for a system that, again, doesn't reduce the needs of a particular immigrant just based on their ability to contribute to our economy, but overall a system that sees them as human beings with human needs, right? And so I hope that's where we can strive for. But I know, you know, Canada has a much better reputation, and Canada does have a lot to learn from, and this country has a lot to learn from Canadian immigration, their Canadian immigration system. But you know, I think there's still some some issues that they have that we should learn from as well.
Okay, go ahead.
Sahar, you know I love you, but we disagree on something that you just said. It really bothered me. Criticizing the media, and they should be criticized. But when we attack the free press and saying we need to create alternative media, that really bothers me, because that's something that the Trump administration is doing. That's something that Nazi Germany did a long time ago, undermining the free press. We need to reform the press and tell them where they're making their mistakes, but not create our own media. That really bothered me.
Thank you, Terry. This is Commissioner Terry Van, by the way. He is my colleague in the Office of Human Rights. We're both commissioners with the Human Rights Commission in Montgomery County. So thank you for your point. I see where you're coming from, but maybe I should make myself clear by what I mean by that. Of course, definitely, when you say mainstream media, we cannot put everybody in the same basket. I mean, just like there will be some, biased reporting, there will be some media outlets that are good. But unfortunately, in many cases, we see some kind of stereotypical pattern that dominates in most of the headlines in the mainstream media. And the issues of racial profiling, religious profiling, or stereotyping of Muslims and all of that has been pretty much more or less the norm. We need to reach out to these media outlets, make sure our voices are heard, like you said, the process of reform. But we most definitely need, in parallel, to create what is called citizen journalism in a much more professional and informed way. And by that I mean pretty much a good example would be the beautiful young lady who was able to creatively and confidently and courageously put together this beautiful documentary that we saw this evening, right? I really thought this is beautiful, and I think we need more of that. So when I say alternative media, I mean more platforms that would give an option and a platform for diverse voices to be heard. A meeting like the one we're having this evening, this kind of discussion, these kinds of speakers, this kind of audience, that in my opinion needs to be heard, and it needs to be shown in the media, right? And something like, for example, the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, or interfaith dialogues and activities like the ones that me and you attend all the time. How many people attend? Tens? 20, 30, 50, 100, 200? If you are able to create a media platform, let's say online, using social media and new media, and invest in young people and invest in these media platforms, you will be able to amplify the message. Because I always say there are good people doing good work in the world, it is just that we don't hear enough about them. So I think I hear you, and I don't think we should give up on the mainstream media. We should reach out to them and try to make our connection with them. This is very important, but I do believe strongly in parallel that we do need to invest in citizen journalism and other media platforms that can also give voice to the voiceless and represent many, many more diverse points of view and different communities, and amplify the voices of goodness that exist in the world. We just don't hear enough about them.
Well, first of all, we want to thank the Muslim Community Center for allowing us to be here. We'd also like to thank all of our panelists. I mean, we have really heard a lot of rich information tonight, and a lot that makes us think. And I took down one quote: "This is not the time to be good. Write to your senators. We need champions for this issue." I also note that tonight we have a few candidates with us. We are a nonpartisan group, so I'm not going to have you stand and say anything, but I am going to recognize you. We have Danielle Mative, who is running for County Council at Large. We have Bill Conway, who is running for County Council at Large. We have Marilyn Pierre, who's running for Circuit Court Judge. And I am running for the Board of Education, the only nonpartisan position. So we hope that you enjoyed tonight. As you noticed, Chris has been taping this, and it will go up hopefully by tomorrow. I hope I'm not putting too much pressure on you, Chris, but he's very good. And look for our next program. If you signed in, we have your email address. We would like you to join us. I'm not sure of the topic. It's going to be based on probably what's hot at the moment. Might be healthcare with December coming up. But at any rate, we will be notifying you. Thank you for coming, and we hope you enjoyed it.